But explain to the audience why ketamine is so effective when it comes to mental health, anxiety, depression. I mean, I would say a success story. I was a basket case 3.5 years ago. And I just stumbled across, ketamine with stellate ganglion blocks. It was a combination of therapies that was being used by special operations guys and first responders. Uh, but a lot of people, and they say, "Oh man, they don't. They're either afraid or they don't understand that this is safe, that you know where you're at, and your experiences are positive, and even if they're negative, they're positive because of what you're going through is helping you evolve." Hey, folks, welcome to another episode of Broken Brains with your host, Bruce Parkman, sponsored by the Mac Parkman Foundation, the national voice in repetitive brain trauma and what this mental health crisis is doing to our veterans, athletes, and kids. Our podcast is all about those issues in the form of repetitive head impacts and repetitive blast exposure for our veterans, where our kids, our athletes, and veteran brains are being changed and damaged by the exposure to this long-term subconcussive trauma that is resulting in the largest preventable cause of mental illness in this country. And why is this important? Because this is not trained in any medical, nursing, or psychological institute of training. So our entire medical population is unaware that this situation exists. And these young kids and these veterans and these athletes go misdiagnosed, mistreated. And that is why this is partially why we're having this huge problem with mental health in our athletic and sports communities and our veterans communities. And only you with education can become informed and make right decisions to protect yourself and those that you love. So that's why we're here, plus the fact that we get to work from the Mac Parkman Museum here in Anna Maria, Florida, and we get to work with amazing guests, researchers, scientists, authors that we bring in, and today is no exception. It's going to be an exciting show. I want to introduce Miss Christi Myers, who's an EMTP and an MS, and the founder and CEO of Flow Integrative, a psychedelic wellness clinic in Encinitas, California. With over 20 years as a paramedic and educator, and we have to understand how much trauma these EMS people see in their careers. And I didn't understand it till I started attending some of these psychedelic experiences. She now leads the integration of ketamine-assisted therapy to treat trauma, depression, PTSD, and anxiety, especially amongst first responders and veterans. A former emergency responder for agencies, including the Department of Defense in San Bernardino County, Ms. Myers saw the deep impact of trauma firsthand. She holds degrees in emergency medical technology, public safety administration, and organization leadership, and is a certified and integrative mental health professional. Under her leadership, Flow Integrative has become a model clinic in the Anthea network, offering psychedelic therapy through innovative partnerships. Ms. Myers is a passionate advocate for expanding access and breaking the stigma around psychedelic mental health care. And this is one of the issues that we need more than ever is when it comes to RBT and mental health treatments. Ms. Myers, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Bruce. I appreciate it.
Hey, how did you get into this? I mean, obviously there's always a story between, somebody's career and where they end up right now. So let's talk, man. So how'd you get here?
Ketamine found me. At the time I was earning tenure as a professor, and ketamine entered our drug box. So if you were to go right now across the nation, a large majority of fire departments and private ambulance companies carry ketamine as a primary treatment for pain. Excited delirium just depends on the county and your medical director and what we're using it for. And so at the time, I was teaching anatomy, physiology, pharmacology, and the theoretical side of medicine as it pertains to EMS. I lectured on ketamine 3 times a year to all different cohorts of individuals, which just allowed my knowledge base to deepen immensely, especially as I pertained it to the anatomy and physiology. And then simultaneously, right, we're encroaching on COVID. The mental health crisis was not necessarily being witnessed to the magnitude as what happened during those years with COVID. However, I was watching students with the compounding stressors, um, they were becoming suicidal. Some were actually taking action, or we were self-sabotaging to the point with overconsumption of alcohol or sugar, or fingering our phones. And so you're watching this compounding effect. And at the time, the embodiment of what I was doing, right? To truly allow people to become the most evolved version of themselves, but on their own timeline. And what I mean by that is I told them what they needed to accomplish in order to be successful. It was none of my business how they got there, as long as they stayed in integrity. Allowing people to truly become the most evolved version of themselves without my essentially rules of engagement, right? Here's the standard, here's the integrity. And if there's one thing, Bruce, that we all know is you can't fake medicine. It gets exploited really quickly, right? And so if you cheat, you only cheat yourself, because at the end of the day, you still have to take all the practical side of it, and it gets exploited really quickly if you don't know what the hell you're doing. And so it was just this amazing opportunity to watch students flourish to the greatest of their capacity. And at the same time, when COVID hit, as it progresses, when COVID hit, it was very clear to me that I needed to start building this on a mission to help the help. If you see a problem, you do nothing about the problem, you are indeed the problem. And that was one of my mantras early on in the roles that I held. And so I set out, and it was nothing short of phenomenal of the way the universe just continuously kept unfolding with what I was creating as a co-creation to truly, what I believe is, evolve our consciousness and transcend suffering.
Well, we're going to get to all those concepts here pretty quick, because there's a lot of there's a lot of things that I would love people to understand when they start talking about themselves, their ego, and where that is, how that part of them is prohibiting them from truly growing as a human being. But first, how did you become aware of, ketamine? Of course, our medics in special forces carry it in their kits. We've had, some cases where they have abused it, or,
For
they
sure.
were dealing with it, right? So, but how did you transition from your knowledge and awareness of ketamine as a pain medicine to ketamine as a, mental health treatment protocol, and the ability to, change,
For
how people deal
sure.
with trauma?
Well, when I started lecturing pharm, right? So if you look at my background, I've been boots on the ground for 20 years. And as I was evolving in education, I just finished my master's degree, and I stepped into pharmacology, and I was like, what? You know what I mean? Like,
Whoops. I didn't go.
hello.
I didn't want to go
You
here.
can't fake it. Like, I mean, you can, but those teachers get exploited so quickly, right? I mean, who knows what the fuck they're talking about and who doesn't. And so I was just as much back in medic school as the students, so that I could stand in that classroom and deliver information competently. Plus, too, that it's in my nature to understand what the hell it is I'm doing. Otherwise, what the hell am I doing it for? And so the more I lectured on the farm, you got to look at the off-label usage. And this is one of the biggest conversations around ketamine, right? I would venture to say 75%, and that's me even being conservative, medications are being used off-label. And if you look at the history of ketamine, it actually replaced PCP in the operating room. And so the gift in my capacities with lecturing, right? I would take the intro to EMS. We're not very old as a profession. I mean, shit, less than maybe 60 years ago, we used to transport people in hearses. And if your Glasgow coma scale was less than 8, we took your ass to the morgue. You mean people woke up in a morgue because they were simply unconscious, but our assessment didn't allow for us to even know that that's what was happening because we were so rudimentary? That's what we kind of forget as a
That's a
species.
nightmare scenario.
Very true. You're like, hey guys, I think we could do some different shit.
I think we can do better.
Right. That's what the whole Glasgow scale, right? Like the Glasgow coma scale. If you were less than 8, you were deemed dead. And so you got put into a hurt. I mean, we're very early in all of this, especially medicine, right? I mean, it's not very old as a profession. And what most aren't acknowledging is that we're all practicing. And so
Practicing.
that's why they
Ah,
call
I
it
like that.
a
Yeah.
practice of medicine, right? And most doctors, and not talking shit, right? But they're feeling to be honest enough to be like, hey, man, I just started practicing. And
I might not know
you're it,
everything.
you're it, little buddy. But once you see the same clinical presentations over and over again, you start to have the commonalities, right? So I can see CHF from a mile away. Same with hypertension. I mean, you get so good at witnessing the commonalities, but they're just different clinical presentations because of the individual, not because of the disease processes. And now we're manifesting even more interesting dysregulations and disorders. But I would argue that it's because of the depth of the unconsciousness that we're in. The body doesn't have the opportunity to stay in stasis, or it's constantly fighting itself, which now we're seeing this compounding. And
Wow.
for sure. And so, with that being said, there was a lot of information that I was presenting concurrently while also bringing in the pharmacology. So, we carry a multitude of medications frontline that we give emergently, and a large majority of those are off label. And so, if you go down the rabbit hole of off label usage, you can see that all of these have different capacities. It's the dosing. And so for me, ketamine is conscious sedation. And when I worked in the emergency room, we used it almost daily on pediatrics. It's one of the safest medications we have, and it's recognized globally for that. Then you look at the OR applications, which is much higher than what we're doing sub anesthetically. And then you look at the way that we're giving it in EMS, and that is actually one of the least documented dosing structures. And we're doing it daily, no questions asked, because somebody made a protocol.
For pain.
Well, it's cancer, it's sickle cell, it's pain. We have the capacity to significantly reduce PTSD in the field, but we're learning how to yield it. And what's fascinating to me is there is not many psychological questions that go alongside of it. Oh, yeah. And so this is where it's like, okay, if not me, then who? My gift of building protocols and lecturing and the capacities and the knowledge, it was like, okay, Christi, this is how we make an impact. And I just started building. And what that transpired into was, and you made mention, I built out the first employer-driven benefit for ketamine in the workplace. And my
So you're getting insurance. Is this is
100%. I just went in network with TriWest. It is a complete
oh, dude, we gotta talk,
Oh
man.
yeah,
That is really critical information to get out, and I want our listeners to understand. If we could talk a little bit, and I know you're getting around to that, but you're talking about the even the pharmacological big
pharmacological.
word,
I know
big word Wednesday. It is big word Wednesday,
I like
and yeah, and use as well but it's all about pain. It's not about mental illness. It's not about transcending and understanding and unloading trauma or resolving trauma.
Oh yeah.
How did we get from ketamine, the medicine that off-label, whether it's used as sedation, anesthesia, off-label usage, you saw it, to where we're now seeing, and I would say the successful use. I have done ketamine for a long time, and the successful use of ketamine in the mental health area, but it's still a fight, and you're making strides. So,
Thanks,
um,
Barry. Yeah. And that's the truth of it. And I would be lying to you if I didn't tell you that my protocol hasn't evolved immensely from my first administrations. And that's where it's very transparent in my delivery. Like, hey, you're meeting the medicine and it's meeting you. But first, I was the first person to drop in to see and my first dose, Bruce, I was running variables, right? I'm like, at 0.4 mg per kg is, you know what I
right?
mean? Like,
No,
Eh, and so there's this fine line, right? It's a sense of like, don't getting high on your own supply, and you could potentially lose everything, versus like what the hell is it? I put myself through my protocol very intentionally to see if what I'm asking is obtainable. And this is the developmental process. And so, back to come full circle, when you look at it from the limbic system, and now this is when I was lecturing and tying all of the pharmacological side into anatomy and physiology, because let's get real, for a large majority of us, as we're learning, we data dump. And I'm no different, right? When I was going through medical school, there's so much information that you're learning. You cram it, exam it, dump it, on to the next, right? And so when you start lecturing on it, that's a whole different story. And so the knowledge base that I was relearning was phenomenal because now I'm a decade into actually practicing. So there's a whole nother level of comprehension as I'm delivering information. And if you look at the limbic system, and this is where ketamine has nothing short of phenomenology, because of its capacity to take us out of survival temporarily. When you take survival offline, now you're allowing for the body to go into automaticity. You're allowing the heart and the breath to have coherency. Otherwise, when we're enmeshed in survival with hurry and worry and speed and aggression, our body is responding as if we're threatened and we're sitting still.
And that's something that, I'd like the audience to understand about ketamine. And Christy, please explain this, is that, the medicine, allows you, explain to the audience, I've been through, many ketamine sessions, right? Everyone
IV or
different.
how?
What's that?
Was it IV or how did you take it?
I like IV. I just feel that IV is the best.
Yep,
I've
same.
tried IM. I will not do the nasal stuff. The IM was okay, but the IV I think provides. And then I had to experiment with my own. I was talking to the guy. I said, "How much you give me?" And so I said, "I don't like this hour thing. I don't like coming out in 40 minutes. I want to get more out of this." So we went an hour and a half, 2 hours. I was down for 2 days. Couldn't even move, man. My brain was so tired. But I also want to dial into neuroplasticity and why I think ketamine is so important from a brain damage, not just a trauma perspective. But explain to the audience why ketamine is so effective when it comes to mental health, anxiety, depression. I would say a success story. I was a basket case 3.5 years ago. And I just stumbled across, ketamine with stellate ganglion blocks. It was a combination of therapies that was being used by special operations guys and first responders. But a lot of people, and they say, "Oh man, they don't. They're either afraid or they don't understand that this is safe, that you know where you're at, and your experiences are positive, and even if they're negative, they're positive because of what you're going through is helping you evolve." Can you
Yeah,
touch upon that?
for sure. And one thing I do want to help reframe is that when you said you were down for 2 days, and I want to just help you with uh, allowing you to witness this. So, myself included, when I finished my professional career in helicopters, doing hover step outs, and you know what I mean? Like you're full throttle. The military, we are very
Dialed
paramilitaristic,
in.
right? And in that, think about the thresholds you're creating. So your adrenal glands are directly being impacted because of catecholamines. And so when you work with ketamine, your body then shows you from a new awareness just how tired you are. And so that 2 days you speak of is truly the magnitude of you resting and repairing. And it's to the depth that we've been exhausted that now the medicine's allowing us to see that level of fatigue for repairing. It's
Okay.
the adrenal glands, man. Think about how much we
I
can
don't have any. They're all drained.
You fell out many years ago, man. I've been intentionally repairing my adrenal glands, and you don't realize the magnitude until you retire or you transition because we're also taught to push through. I could be tired as shit, 36 hours on the line, and you're still doing the work. And now, we're packing pre workout in our cheeks because we don't want to even drink the water with it, right? You're just letting it. Stabilize there.
So talk about, like, a lot of our listeners are military first responders, that are, having issues. And so how would they understand or know, like, what are the symptoms of adrenal gland fatigue, right? That they're all coming to this from different perspectives with limited knowledge. So, if they, obviously what you just discussed would be very important for them to understand.
For sure. Well, I mean, on one end of the spectrum, we manifest impotency.
Okay. Yep.
Eh,
Big problem in our.
it's a huge, people are medically retiring for it.
Oh, we've got doctors giving testosterone to 36-year-old men when they really need to be helping them, let their natural system recover, because that's just a tragic option right
Because
now.
now you're a
At that,
lifetime customer. You
yeah.
stop producing it organically, and now you are reliant on synthetic usage. And I mean, to give awareness, ketamine is in the same category as testosterone as far as its scheduling. And so
Okay.
another fascinating thing, Bruce, and we can unpack that as well too, but why do we think that we can give ketamine but not receive it? And so if you look at a large majority of our profession, they're all on testosterone, completely normalized, and it's a Schedule 3. And
Yeah,
that's
they
one of
give it out like peanuts now. I mean, they
for
just
sure.
look for reasons to give it out.
Yeah, for sure. Different topic, but same, right? And it's just kind of interesting to me, the mindset around it. So one, the fatigue. The other thing that we see is we're distracting ourselves immensely, right? And so most of us are addicted to overtime and continuously working, because where we experience the most adrenal deficiency is when we go home. You'll hear
When
most,
you need it the most.
for sure. And now we're not showing up for our kids. We're not showing up for our wives. We have lack of engagement. We have all of these things, right? And now we're just chasing the dragon with trying to feel something, which is for some extreme sports. Right now we're riding our mountain bike fast as shit down the biggest hill that we can find so we can feel something. Or we're going down the lustrous side and now we're having interesting experiences with oxytocin and lust. Or we're chemically addicted to our phone and pornography, or we're over consuming caffeine and we're pushing through and we're short fused and tempered. And so now we're unpredictable with the lashing out because our body truly is so tired and we're pushing through. And now you look at the compounding effect. So here comes endocrine collapse and we're normalizing diabetes, right? I mean, people are just walking around with glucometers tacked into their tricep as if it's a standard thing. We're normalizing
Yeah.
it. For sure. And by the time the endocrine system collapses and we're experiencing that, the adrenal glands have shit the bed a long time ago. Okay. And now we can't go into actual sleep. And so now sleep's compromised. Now here comes the medication route. So now I'm going to hit you with some trazodone. I'm going to hit you with some Ambien. I'm going to hit you with, or we're, over consuming melatonin, which that also is compromising our body's natural ability to regulate and circadian rhythm. And then where we have this interesting capacity is it's like, well, fuck it, then I'm going back to work. So now I'm 7 days on, 8 days on, 9 days on, because that at least I have sustained. I'm not witnessing the magnitude of my fatigue by going into an environment that doesn't have the same type of stimulation. And you see that especially in emergency medicine. You're on a call, right? And now you got to remember the thresholds we're creating. So if my worst call, which is one of the most notorious questions asked, right? What's the worst thing that you've seen? It's fucked up to answer, but we all have it. So now that's my threshold. And so if I'm not on a call that is creating a physical response through adrenaline, it's lackluster. And so then we see if I'm on abdominal pain for 3 months, most likely it's going to piss me off. And so now I'm not showing up to render care, right? I'm showing up listening to the radio, wishing I was on a GSW or a stabbing or whatever's popping off on the radio.
So
Now
you're
I
not
want to
there
do
for your
the base.
patients.
Oh yeah. So now you're either dumping them in the, and not saying like this isn't depicting EMS poorly, right? But this is what we're truly facing as a culture, right? And so now these calls that are lackluster, we're forgetting how we show up in public service because we're attaching a chemical feeling to the magnitude of the call we're experiencing. And so if majority of the calls are, honestly, let's get real. I would venture to say a large percentage of EMS calls don't necessarily need 911, but we're being used as frontline providers because of the magnitude of the ER backups, and we have a
Shortage.
huge systemic problem. You can't get into your PCP or your primary doc for 3 months. Shit's going on. You also don't want to drive to the hospital yourself, or you're not Ubering. So I'm going to call 911 and I'm going to get right up to the hospital. Let's see what's going on. And you have two choices when you're a medic. You can either educate them and be like, hey, man, I'm going to most likely take you to the emergency room because this is not an emergency and we're not primary care. And we're educating in the field, but we're missing that component right now because of the burnout. We're just like, fuck it, get in.
Yeah. I talk to people a lot, and you're covering a lot of ground here, Christy, that's really important. And I do want to get to another aspect of ketamine that I feel is important. But no, I mean, this is amazing because I tell police officers all the time, I just don't know how you do it. And until I started leveraging psychedelics to improve my brain health and my mental health, I never really engaged with first responders. I had some friends that were cops, and I never really met EMS. And actually, one of the facilitators at the ayahuasca ceremonies that I've been through is an EMS lady who has seen a lot. And she is a very, I would say, universally connected spiritual, just a monster, just a wonderful woman that has helped so many veterans. I go to these ceremonies to watch, and I've done my share to the point where it's enormously. I've seen the benefits personally, and as an observer, but
Yeah.
police officers taking that like soldiers, when we go, we're gone for 6 months. And yeah, we'd always prefer war to just a J set or a training mission because that what, like you're talking about, the edge, the rush. Hey man, I don't want to waste my time with that. Why should I train? Right? Let's do the real thing, right? So, and that's one of the reasons we have repetitive blast exposure problems in the military, is because we don't just want to train. We want to train like it's war. So we throw a lot of bombs in there and we are messing our brains up unnecessarily. Because look, once you know how to shoot a gun, you know how to shoot a gun. All right. No, once you know how to make a breaching charge and put it on a door, okay, you know how to do it. Yeah, you got to practice it a couple times a year, but you don't have to do it every damn day. And so, but with our first responders, to include, EMS, fire, and police, the fact that they have to go home every night or every 2 days. I mean, I cannot. It's one of the reasons I stayed single my entire military career, is I could not even contemplate being a dad and a husband. I was just having fun. You don't have to grow up in the military. In your world, you have to be an adult. You have to adult every day and deal with these high stress situations that end up impacting you as a person, chemically and the whole 9 yards.
Right.
And it's just a lot. But the thing that I think you're exposing here is that so many of our first responders don't know how to ask for help, and they don't understand why they're medicating. They just know that they're suffering, or they think they're crazy, and they don't understand the physiological complexities that are resulting from their careers in the person who they are right now.
Right.
And that there is a chance for them to become somebody else.
Right. And it's catecholamines. And if you look at catecholamines, they're being produced endogenously from the
Can
adrenal.
you explain catecholamines? Because that is a new one for me and
Oh,
probably
yeah.
most of the people on this call.
So we are the drugs, right? Meaning we produce epinephrine, norepinephrine, acetylcholine, oxytocin, dopamine, and serotonin as the most incredible drugs that have the capacities. And a beautiful example of that is an orgasm. the magnitude of the drugs that we can create in connection and procreation and adrenal function, if we're exhausting those drugs, now this little guy is dopamine. That's the hits of reward. And so the more we saturate ourselves with synthesizing and not truly achieving or in human connection and separation and serotonin, which occurs in gut and as well, like if you look at it, it's a 90-10 or 80-20, depending on the text that you read. But those catecholamines can become exhausted and mismanaged based off of the circumstantials of our environment, especially as it pertains to shift work. Now, they run dual purpose. So, one, there's an environmental feeling, and there is a contemplative or thinking. And so, if I am sitting still, thinking, ruminating, conjuring, I can create a catecholamine response, which is through fear. And so now, if I am worried or hurried or in speed or aggression, epinephrine is coursing through my veins and body, and
Good
it's
Lord.
buddy norepinephrine, right, which is a vessel response. And so now I'm restrictive. So now my breath is shallow, my heart is racing, and I am surging, but I'm sitting still.
Wasting all that energy.
For sure. And so think about the exhaustive capacities in the body physiologically. That's how the adrenal glands shit the bed.
I have been there a couple of times, just in business alone, not talking about the military, just life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a lot of people resonating with that right now. But quick question, as a soldier, does an orgasm use catecholamines or produce them? I mean, because soldiers are like, that's one of our sex, you know.
For sure. Well, that's how we confuse lust and love.
Ah,
So when you're on the hunt, right, and you're essentially trying to satisfy an urge, your body is producing this pheromone connection to attract a mate. And early in adulthood, we're surging, right? And so then we're just looking for a place to dump. If we're in our primal behavior and not in a conscious state, which is why you see so many people now talking about semen retention and what that allows for the energy that it creates, because we're not just simply discharging, which is why you'll see the different levels of consciousness as it pertains to where they're willing to put their business. It becomes primal. And so now, if I don't have essentially a moral compass or a level of integrity in my capacities of my consciousness, I'm even willing to go find a glory hole.
so if you're in a committed relationship that, you know, where you're not hunting or whatever, then you're fulfilling that primal need without, you're saving your catecholamines, I guess, or using them better or whatever.
For sure. Well, if you're practicing semen retention, and that's even a variable, right? Because are we in a trauma bonded relationship? Are we in a conscious relationship? Or do I just have access to getting some nightly and I'm tolerating it, but I'm still fantasizing and ruminating, and we're, you know what I mean? Like, so there's some stuff to unpack.
Wow. Yeah.
Depending on the capacity, which is why adultery becomes one of the most sought after drugs. I mean, look at how much, we're prevalent for it in EMS, right? Adultery is all over the place. Because think about the lustriousness. The lustriousness behind it. Now, that feeling of chasing, the potential of getting caught, this creates a whole nother thrill. And so now we're chasing that, and it's usually catastrophic at the end, right? I mean, most of that comes down to the fact that I don't have the courage to tell you, hey, I'm not interested anymore, because we initially confused lust with love.
Yep.
Could you imagine if we were honest and we're like, hey man, I just want to get laid, and I don't want to lie to you and tell you that I'm interested in you. I simply just want to have fun with you. That conversation is a whole nother thing than this faux, I love you, but I also love your sister and her friends, and you know what I mean, or
All
whatever.
created because
Oh,
of
for
your
sure.
decades of being a cop or a soldier and
Well,
what the impact is.
well, now we're chasing feelings, right? And so that has a different profession, because if we don't have connection, right? And this is where the wives and daughters and children need to be included, in the sense of, if I don't have the capacity to tell you the shit that I just saw, I'm creating even more disconnection.
And so many men and women do not talk about their
Oh, for
experiences. And
sure. For
so
sure.
that, I mean, yeah, and that's something that, because we just don't want to burden people with, I mean, I can't imagine coming back from picking up an automobile accident, right? And, whatever, you've seen as an EMS and having to share that. But you're saying that if you do share it, it helps, from an understanding perspective, keep the bonds that you created. I
For
mean,
sure. It's to what capacities. Otherwise we're compartmentalizing. I mean, there's a multiplicities of the consciousness that is being shared between a majority. But uh, early on, a lot of times we're picking significant others based off of our unresolved trauma and that bonding, which then we just keep perpetuating, which is where domestic violence comes online. And you have all of these other things that we could unpack and talk about in depth.
wow, that'd be a whole series of shows here to get into that stuff. But
For
man,
sure.
yeah. I mean, let's. So one of the issues with ketamine, and as from my perspective, as we talk about repetitive brain trauma, is I am of the opinion that ketamine actually makes the brain work. Like it makes it flex like a muscle, because I am so tired afterwards. But I feel a good tired, like I just ran a marathon with my brain. And when we deal with repetitive brain trauma, we're dealing with sometimes significant physiological damage to the brain that has resulted in mental illness, not just from trauma or from patterns of our youth or multi-generational patterns of alcoholism or whatever. We have an issue. We have a physiological issue as well.
For
And
sure.
I am of the opinion that ketamine has, in terms of neuroplasticity, rewiring, allowing. There's a concept that learned the other day where it allows the brain, different parts of the brain that are usually restricted from talking to each other, to communicate, opening up new the way you can put things together in a ketamine experience with those aha moments. Goes, that's why I feel that way or whatever, is amazing. So can we talk a little bit about how ketamine impacts the brain physiology? What's actually going on when you're having these experiences or these you're going through these events?
Oh yeah.
How's that impacting the brain physiologically? Because it is amazing.
For sure. And this will tie in beautifully, Bruce, in the sense, the limbic system is responsible for displaying information from the back of the brain forward, right? We're perceiving our environment nanoseconds before we can think about it. And so when you temporarily take the limbic system offline, which is the importance of IV, and that is my expertise, you take the limbic system offline sequentially, intentionally, and dose specifically, which is really important to remember. This is not a go big or go home, and it definitely less is more development
Thank you. Thank
for
you.
sure.
Yep.
This fucking sledgehammer approach is not in the highest good, right? And so when you take the limbic system offline, now you're giving neurologically the capacities for consciousness, new consciousness, to usher in. So we're disengaging the default mode network. We're temporarily taking survival offline. And so that's the reason why you're so exhausted, is because of the magnitude of the things that you've experienced on earth in life thus far. The variability in that is to the individual. You take a 25-year-old in here and they're going to bounce back within 2 hours. It's not until we become further down the line. Anyways, now the pituitary gland has the opportunity to scan as a master gland. Now we're repatterning this VQ mismatch of being shallow in our breath. So now the vena cava, the aorta, the vagus nerve, the phrenic nerve, all that run through the diaphragm, have these capacities now to start actually communicating with the physical body. This is where R&R comes in. If we've been shallow and under duress and not breathing purposefully and intentionally, imagine the portal backup pressure that's occurring in all capacities. And so now you're actually witnessing the magnitude of the fatigue in the body. At the same time, you're experiencing the mirroring as we unpack the information that has been acquiesced or stored in the amygdala and the hippocampus. It's a developmental process. The question I get asked often is, how many sessions do I need? And it's like, well, how much trauma is stored and how much have you processed and how much have you suppressed? Because the other thing professionally is that people are like, well, I know what's in there. I don't want to see it. You're like, well, it's still in there. That's the unconsciousness that's running you. And I'm not sure if I can present this, but I just put this together as a presentation, and I would love to show you what I mean by the unconsciousness and the magnitude of what we're unpacking. And this example that I would like to show is from a medically retired firefighter paramedic who has complex PTSD and TBI. To show you what it is as the individual of what we're unpacking. And I would love for us to be able to, and I say us as a profession, to be able to show more of why aren't we doing EEGs before we work with the medicine? Or for some of us, we are, right? Let me see if I can pull this up here.
This will be a first. Case of beer, Denny. Every time we do something in Special Forces for the first time, it's a case of beers.
Let's see if it'll let me. It's making me open my system settings. Yeah, perfect. Let's do this and let's see. Put in my little password. I just put, yeah, it's going to make me quit and open. Anyways, what this shows, and it's nothing short of phenomenal, right? I did a lot of work with HRV and pulling up the current brainwave states. And what I was witnessing is the magnitude of the unconsciousness as it pertains to delta brainwave states. A large majority of us are walking around Earth right now completely unconscious, or 80%, 70%, a large percentage of our capacities.
And explain consciousness, because
Yes.
this is a concept that's pretty new to me from dealing with my ego and finding my path to from a spiritual growth perspective. So explain to the audience, because you're not walking around unconscious, but from this perspective you kind of are. So.
Neurologically, we're asleep. And so a great example is where we as professions, we talk about alpha as being a type of man. Alpha is a type of brainwave state. You either have it as a dominant brainwave or you don't, which then we see beta. And we can be in different forms of beta. High beta is more of a chaos thinking, which gets misinterpreted as ADHD. And then we have delta, which delta is only supposed to be prevalent when we're sleeping. And so, as an adaptation response, when we're in these stressful situations, the brain will literally put itself into a delta for trauma adaptation. And so now we're not using the prefrontal cortex for conscious thinking, right? And so if you look developmentally, we're taking information from the environment, we're running it through the limbic system, but first we're playing it through all the scenarios that we've ever acquiesced as a human through the amygdala, through the hippocampus. And now we're sequencing it to create our reality through the prefrontal cortex. And the prefrontal cortex doesn't even come online fully until we're 25.
Well, yeah, and that's another problem. And this is a good point. And we bring this up in the book that I had to write after I lost my son, is that the prefrontal cortex doesn't start developing till 14 and takes 80% of the exposure from contact sports. And when we have a damaged prefrontal cortex, which is the CEO of the brain, we now have a damaged adult. And this is why, ketamine from a restorative capacity and I'm still talking about the physiological impacts of that I'd like to dive into a little bit more, I think is also helpful, as well as resolving the trauma that we have from our careers, our childhood, our ancestry, wherever you want to go
Yeah.
with that. But,
Sure. And what I was able to show was that after one ketamine infusion, it disperses the delta brainwave states up to 30 to 40, even 50%. And now you see this emergence of alpha, beta, theta, and even gamma were coming online. So that's what when I say that we're becoming aware that we're aware. If I'm unconscious, sure, I have memorization. That's muscle memory. I know how to put my shoes on. I can drive the same damn way to work. It doesn't mean that I'm consciously
good
thinking.
job.
And so, which is to the point, we've all driven somewhere and we're like, fuck, I don't even remember that drive. Because you memorized it a long time ago and the body's just rehearsing it. You were simply along for the ride.
Yep. How many times do you hit those red lights? Your body, you wake up and you're like, how did I stopped the car? I mean, it's completely automatic.
Sure. We do it in conversation. Like, look how much we even do it to our kids. We just like, we're not thinking. We're thinking, but not listening.
We're not listening. We're not
We're not
engaging.
listening. We're not engaging. Kids know that. That's why they just stop talking. And now we're hurting them because we're teaching them about unlovability. And at the end of the day, that's what all of this is resolving. And so there's a bunch that's to unpack there, right? And this is what my mission is, and to truly educate now that after this, right, I left as a tenured professor of emergency medicine. I built some phenomenology with ketamine infusion therapy. I've had so much opportunity to serve so many different cohorts of men and women. And now I'm coming full back into education and the training along the methodology and the importance of how to work with this specifically because of the legalities, right? This is something that right now you're back boots on the ground. There is no downtime and it is legal. And so there are
It is
some.
legal, and
Oh,
that's a
for sure,
big, and
100%
it's
legal.
available. I mean,
Available.
I think it's very expensive given the cost of the drug itself. But, once we start talking insurance coverage, then, that is, that's coverage, availability, cost are real concepts here that I'd like to delve into. But so one of my issues with ketamine is I don't want anybody in the room. I hate that. It drives me nuts. I prefer to be in a dark room with my blinders on. But, that's me. And I have not gone to ketamine treatments because they want somebody in the room, because I deal with things that are very personal in nature and I just don't want to share them. I want to work on my own stuff. I own this, whether it's my past or me. But for you, your protocols, and this is, I think, something else. Every time I call a ketamine clinic, they all have a different approach, whether it's
Oh
the
yeah,
amount of medicine I get,
red
the
bloods.
amount of time I'm in the chair, the preparation, this and that. And I think, for your point, standardization and protocols that can be accepted across the industry are exactly what's needed. So talk to us a little bit about, how you run a ketamine, a ketamine session.
For sure. And Bruce, to your point, some of that, of what you make mention, is a trauma response of hyper independence. And not to deduce or just make you aware, right? The consciousness of the provider. So, like for myself, I anchor in. I'm expanding my consciousness to the greatest of my capacities and allowing a container for you to maximize your benefit, right? And so that's when you have a provider in the room, what you're probably experiencing, and if the providers have a lot of unresolved trauma, you're picking up on that shit.
Yeah, I know this. I don't want their energy in my room when I'm
For
dealing with
sure.
my own stuff, right? I don't need that. I
You're a
went through an
whole nother.
ayahuasca experience with 12 veterans in an enclosed environment and almost lost my mind. No, because I do believe in this energy stuff, and I don't need your
100%.
energy. I need, so yeah.
100%. Just like for me personally, who holds my space? Because for me to be in that room, you're 100% tracking. Practitioners are off gassing, same as patients are off gassing. It's a secondary and tertiary exposure that we are being exposed to as energy fasciculates from the physical body that's being released that was once harbored and misinterpreted as anxiety.
And you bring up a good point, because you're in a completely open and receptive state when you are in this world and you're in that zone. I mean, you are open up to other people, and you just, it's just that, and
Oh,
the memories that I've recovered. Oh my
yeah.
God, of my boy. I mean, I've been
Oh,
laughing and crying, and
yeah.
I can't wait. It's been about 8 months. I just feel this urge to go back and do it again. I got to make arrangements. Kind of a pain where I'm at, which gets to the point of accessibility. But all right, so your protocols are IV, and then you have a dosage rate that you feel, is that based on weight or?
Well, it's based on individuals. So I take into consideration, and this is what I'm advocating for, right? The protocols that we created, that to be the foundation for a large majority of practitioners for them to build upon, because otherwise there is a lot of psychosis that's happening in the field because they're giving doses that are egregious and they're developmental, right? To go low and slow allows you to start to experience the magnitude of your dysregulation. If you rip the bottom out of someone, what I refer to it as is like Ghostbusters when they open the trap. You can't just make somebody blatantly aware of everything that they've ever compartmentalized. They will go into a cascading, which then gets misunderstood as a psychotic break. And next thing you know, you're on a slew of
Bingo.
benzos.
That's been coming up a lot with Bufo conversations, tell you the
Oh,
truth.
yes. We're not supposed to blast off to the Godhead for fuck's sake. We are supposed to developmentally, right? Uh, DMT lays dormant in all of us. Every single one of us are a Schedule 1. Period. The end.
I am the drug. Yeah, you
Yes.
said that earlier.
And so we're waking up a latent system. You wouldn't go into a hibernating bear and fucking hit him upside the head. You may want to just gently nudge that guy and be like, hey, it's wake up time. Big difference, babe. Big difference, right?
And you, yeah.
And so now we're in still, this is where spiritual ego can come in and the different complexities of the provider if they haven't been doing the work themselves. And earlier of what you said, because I do want to tie back into that. If providers are in the room and they're typing away on their computer or fingering their phone or on Instagram, they're opening up other dimensions that is going to put you into urgency. If providers are going to be in the room, they need to anchor in and hold space, period, the end, which is going to also show them the magnitude of their dysregulation because I can guarantee how much they're going to look to finger their phone.
Yeah, I mean, I talked to ketamine clinics. I did one. I did it once, and I'm like, dude, I could hear you, I could feel you. This is not right. And I
Ignorant.
had my tunes on. You wouldn't
Right.
believe how many ketamine clinics I call. They have you show up. They don't even tell you to bring music or bring headphones to do it. They put these people through this experience without it.
Some of them are
Can
having you watch YouTube videos of like
can you
monk
imagine
shit of
this?
Iceland. Oh, yeah.
And this is what I want people to understand too, is this is work. If you do this, you care
Uh-huh.
about yourself. This is not fun, right? This is not a recreation. You hear about ketamine, vitamin K, and all that stuff. No, this is work. And the work that you do on you is flat out stuff that you need to just get done. You're coming to ketamine either because of this podcast, or you might have heard of somebody, or you've been through trauma and you just realize it exists there. But this is spiritual growth of and you are absolutely should be proud of yourself for considering this as one of your options. Do your research and stuff. Talk to Christi, because this is a path to resolving. You have no idea, what I mean. I had no idea how much crap I've been carrying around my entire life, and once you unload it,
For
a
sure.
human being, my wife calls me Bruce 3.0 now, because I have dumped
Fantastic.
so much crap.
Oh, you're not kidding.
My employees are like, who are you, boss? Like, in the last year, I've just, I'm like, hey man, I ain't gonna let the stuff bother me. It's God's will. Everything's gonna happen. I can't control it, so why am I gonna sit here and freak out? But and I think that you're offering an amazing opportunity for people to learn. And dude, I could talk to you like for hours on this stuff, because it's something that is so important to me, and we don't know about it enough about it. So let's get to another point, because we're coming up close on an hour. What you're saying that you're on with TriWest right now.
Oh, yeah. So the work I did with insurance is imperative, but what I am going to really, and I really want to unpack this with insurance. I would love to hop on another call and really speak to this. I built the first employer-driven benefit, 100% covered of 100%. The psychographics and demographics that I served are nothing short of phenomenal, because it gave access to people who wouldn't have ordinarily paid for it themselves. Then I went and I put the practice into all of the blues. I'm in over 900 PPOs. I just became a vendor for the US Olympics. I accomplished Tri-West. And you know what I learned? Is that if you're looking for this medicine, you're looking for this medicine. The accessibility shouldn't come down to a copay because then you're not committing. And if you think about it, you're investing in yourself. To pay $3,500 for a cash pay for you to truly evolve your consciousness significantly, that is a blip financially. Versus what I witnessed with the different mechanisms of entry versus PPO, HMO, Medi, all of these different iterations is nothing short of interesting, because some of them want you to fail a whole bunch of other treatments and now you become treatment resistant. And so now what we're doing is helping you unpack all the harm that you did from failing all of these other modalities.
All these SSRIs and benzos and
Oh
all
yeah,
these
so I'm
things.
going to put you on Klonopin, I'm going to put you on Seroquel, I'm going to put you on Trazodone. You're probably not going to be able to use your penis, and you're really going to have some dysregulation. So I'm also going to do this, and now you have a magnitude of all these other things, and so now you become a long-term customer of
That's what they.
ketamine.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, even Kaiser
Yeah.
will allow you to have infinite amounts of ketamine sessions after you fail 3 to 5 to 10 years of other treatments.
And that should not, is that currently the case? I mean, how do you get prescribed? Well, one thing I will push back a little bit on the investment is just that we deal with people all the time out here in Florida. It's $500 a session. Okay. And, we know the minimum 6 that to get started, or you can talk about that. That's what I've heard. That's what I keep hearing. The 6 to start, over 2
Oh yeah,
weeks, stuff like that.
all
So,
misconceptions for sure. Well,
okay. Talk about that, please.
uh, the benefit of ketamine is the insights are never gonna leave you. This is where free will comes in. And so first one must sit with the medicine in order to see if it's something they want to embark in. Never should we have a standardized, you must sit with this medicine 6 times every other day. The Journal of American Medicine was the first protocol that came out that a lot of providers are attached to. And that was for major depressive disorder. They all had the same BMI, body mass index, and they had all the same DSM. This is not a one size fits all model. And so for people that are curious in this space, same thing of how we're dysregulating people with bufo. One must ask themselves, am I ready to acknowledge that I'm the common denominator in all of my story? And if you can't answer yes to that, to truly witnessing yourself from a higher state of awareness and start unpacking your unconsciousness, which the depth of that is the variable, then you are not ready for psychedelics. And Bruce, if you would have asked me 5 years ago, there is no way that I would have said that. I would have said it's for everyone. Untrue. If you are not ready to embark on a hero's journey of witnessing yourself as an opportunity every day to evolve who you are, to become a more conscious version of yourself rather than rehearsing, reciting this old program and narrative that was stamped into us amniotically.
And that's a big statement for a lot of you out there. And you're talking to a guy here that I am not the person I used to be. Right. And this unfortunately, this journey was started with the loss of my son. And I'm trying to reconcile that, which
Correct,
is,
Bruce.
hard,
Oh,
but,
yeah.
but at the same time, what Christi's talking about is truly important, because a lot of the mental illness that we suffer from as first responders, law enforcement, is induced by our career, and it can be resolved. But you have to do, when she talks about growth, number one, you're going to have to deal with what's been done to you. You're going to have to deal with what you've done to others, which is, man, once you get to that stage, dude, that is a journey.
For
And that is the
sure.
hardest part. And then you have to learn to forgive and love yourself. If these are the goals that you want, in which along the way, you're going to be dumping your mental illness, bro. I mean, as you dump sludge from your background and your life and your childhood, you only become better and lighter and psychologically cleaner and more loving and more kind. And yeah, this is Bruce Parkman. It's I'm the same guy, Pac-Man. Yeah, I'm talking this, okay? And this is evolution. And
Right.
Christie's protocol could be part of that. Now, Christy, how would you evaluate somebody to recommend? Like you just said, hey, if you're not, and that might be your guidance, right? It's like, hey, look, if you're not ready to do this, but we have people that are suffering and they need physiological help, and I honestly believe there is physiological
Yep.
stressors going on in that brain that's improving that brain. It's rewiring that brain. It's doing something in there that helps with there's a lot of scarring. There's a lot of demyelination, dysmyelination. We got blood-brain barrier penetration. We got huge amounts of neuroinflammation that need to be addressed, right? And I do believe that ketamine can help once we get rid of the cause of that damage, which is repetitive blast exposure. We calm down and live our lives without all that trauma. Now we've got to fix this, because without fixing this, we're still going to have mental illness and suicide. We have to fix the brain. We have to promote brain health.
Yes.
What does ketamine do in that regard?
So, and this ties back to what we started initially conversating on. When you pull that limbic system out of the equation temporarily, you have expansiveness of new consciousness. It's being ushered in. And in that ushering, it has this capacity to create new ways of thinking, being, doing for up to 10 days. And so now you're actually creating, it's similar to collateral circulation. Once you hit a certain age, the heart will actually start creating new circulatory pathways around places that we've compromised it from our food and lack of exercise. It's no different in the brain. We only use 5% of our consciousness. The real question becomes, why don't you want to embark on evolving your consciousness, which as a byproduct reduces your suffering? And so
Good statement.
there's a lot of things to unpack there, because we've been influenced by religiosity from different smear campaigns on the war on drugs and what was your belief system up. An ego will let you die. And so for a
Oh.
large majority, right?
That ego, man. Yeah. That's a whole nother
For
show on
sure.
ego, dude. That'd be
And
great.
Bruce, if I would have met you 5 years ago, who knows if you would have been like, you're fucking crazy. Because
I would
you,
not have talked to you. I
no,
would not have talked to you. I would have blown you off. I would absolutely had nothing to do with you, because number one, I didn't know I was suffering, physiological and mentally. I thought I was okay. I hadn't lost my son yet. I was a successful businessman, yada, 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 yada. No, no. And only through, once I got in my hole, it's amazing how the universe, or what I call God, started introducing me to doors. And I am a firm believer, when God puts a door in front of you, you have two options. You can open that puppy and go through it, or you can walk away and never know, and spend the rest of your life wondering
oh,
what was on the other side of that door, man, and you'll never know until you open that puppy. And I've been opening doors ever since. And those doors have led me on this journey that I can help others through me, talking to people like you, where I'm going to spend the rest of my life serving others instead of myself, and helping people understand that there are things out there that can help you with your broken brain, with your broken life, with your broken past, and that you can overcome these things, become a better person, drop this mental illness, get off these goddamn drugs, and get back to yourself, get back to your family, and get back to everybody else you want, to get back to your Lord, get back, whatever's important to your life, go back and find happiness. And you are a huge part of this, man. And but back to this insurance piece. So if you're like a TRICARE guy, I'm a TRICARE guy until I'm 66. I found out I have to go to Medicaid after that,
yeah.
3 more years. So I'm on the other side of the country, and so not a big help there. But if you think that you would like to approach you, right, and get approved for ketamine, what kind of documentation do you have to have? What do you or how would you go about requesting the treatment and getting it covered?
It's the methodology. And so, one, Bruce, with your audience, and this is my grassroots effort, right? One is it's the methodology. For a large majority, well, I can so clear that. For some of the ketamine clinics, they are not above board.
True. Yeah.
And if that's the case, of course you're 100% not going to get insurance coverage. You can't. You've never divulged that that's what you're doing. Period. The end. And then, so the reason the cost is so expensive, and this is going to ripple, right? But I'm going to say it. A ketamine infusion costs $18.
What I heard.
Here's what is happening. You're paying for the burn rate, the provider, the malpractice insurance, if they have any, and you're also paying for whoever's in the room and what they think they're worth and yada, 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 and that's not deducing. And so what my mission is, and now I've been in practice for 5 years. I have fluctuated price all over the place. And I'll tell you right now, even if I were to charge, I would have, cancel clear that. I would have to charge $1,600 a session to turn a profit. How in the
Oh no,
fucking
no, I'm not arguing. I think the cost is, as a businessman, the cost is absolutely related to the cost associated with the business. That without scale
for
and without
sure.
it's
So this is where and this is the grassroots, right? What I am proposing is that we implement this medicine as a standard of care into primary care. Because those guys are already in network with insurance. All I need to do is come in and do an overlay. So my mission has evolved, right? Outside of the years I've spent serving and facilitating and honoring all the different types of consciousness, my mission is now this, right? One, I can overlay everything that I have learned into an existing medical practice and turn on insurance like that.
yeah,
Which
because
now
you're
coming in
giving
for the
IV. I mean, you gotta have a machine. You gotta have
Oh yeah.
the equipment's nothing. A blood pressure monitor, a blood pressure cuff. It's not. There's not a big investment.
Oh, and I've also built out all the protocols for facilitating to be trauma informed, for the nurses to hold the space, and also them understand that ketamine's a mirror and that you're going to be triggered deeply, right? If you haven't done the work as a provider, ketamine's going to eradicate itself out of a lot of practices because of the uncomfortability it causes from the provider patient dynamics. You're going to manifest the people that you need to see in order for you to heal in a different capacity. This is mirroring, right? I can tell you so many different stories of that. And unless the provider, at the end of the day, Bruce, doctors are the number one for suicide.
Wow. And that's because they're picking up all that.
Silently suffering. And plus, too, look at how much we have to, if you want to turn a profit, you have to become a machine, basically.
You are a
And it's
machine.
every
You're a
15
robot.
minutes. And I could, it's just, there's a lot there. Anyways, my mission is to overlay everything that I have built and learned and the workflows, the methodology, and the foundational side of the dosing to doctors who can hear the message, who are conscious and want to open it up and can actually start delivering it, not only as a new additional means for treating those who can become treatment resistant. Instead of pulling people out of the river, why aren't we going up there and figuring out why they're falling in?
Amen.
Why are we waiting till people become treatment resistant or egregiously attached to pharmacological multiple medications rather than helping them evolve their consciousness? And now, if we can allow them to hear new messages with new cognitive capacities, now they can actually be proactive rather than reactive with things that we're trying to share with them as clinicians. Otherwise, it falls on deaf ears.
Another point that you said, what is your position on the integration of therapy with ketamine? Not, I don't believe in like this assisted guided thing. I mean, I think you got to go where the medicine takes you. But
Yeah.
what is your position on therapy, and what should people look for when they if you propose it, what type of therapist would you recommend, whether it's EMDR or anything like that, that they might work with to get to integrate? Because without the work, a lot of it, he doesn't
It's
get it.
developmental for sure. And so I'll give you some quick examples. If you call me, Bruce, and you're like, hey, I've done EMDR, I've done talk therapy, I've exhausted it, I don't resonate with the therapist, I've maxed that dimension out, I've also been on SSRIs, I've come off of it, I've done this work, I do breath work, I do yoga, I'm ready
Every
to
veteran
go.
I know. Yep.
And you're just like, let's fucking do this. Versus somebody who's their throat is still cracking because they don't have the capacities to talk about profound sexual trauma, profound early childhood trauma, whatever it is that they've been storing and suppressing. Those people need to start unpacking, or they're the ones that are predisposed for a potential psychotic break because they haven't even learned how to unpack or tell their story without profound emotional charge. But what we can also show is that if you're retelling your trauma story, you're deepening your network to your trauma story, and you're embellishing it as much as 50% because you're now telling a story from this current age about something that happened 30 fucking years ago.
Yeah. You're right.
You can hear the depth, or at least for me personally, if somebody calls me and they're like, I'm this way because, and they start telling a trauma story of firsthand, secondhand, and tertiary victimization, and they're not acknowledging that they're just re-victimizing themselves because they become addicted to suffering, they have a
And
hell of a lot
attention.
more to unpack. And then the other part of my assessment is, what's your relationship with pharmaceuticals? What's your relationship with alcohol? What's your relationship with porn? What's your relationship with cannabis? What kind of support system do you have? And do you do anything for mindfulness? And if that's the case, that person is going to need a lot more guidance than somebody that essentially comes in as like, look, I cold plunge every morning. I also do saunas. I run for my mental health. I'm doing this, but I know I got blind spots. That person is going to have a different developmental time than somebody else, right? And one thing that we're also not talking about is if we're using psychedelics and having a conversation where we're replaying our victimization, wouldn't that be indicative that we're deepening the network to our suffering? Because as we're trying to create new neural pathways, we're retelling a victimization story and reinforcing suffering in new capacities as we're trying to evolve or reduce it. This stuff isn't long term. One of the most interesting conversations I had in the beginning was people are like, well, how are you getting recurring revenue? And I'm like, well, if you do it right, they're
They
done.
don't want to hear that. I haven't had a treatment in 8 months because I really don't feel the need. Every now and then I say, you know what? I should go back get another
Bullshit.
one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel the call. I feel the need,
Yep,
just like
yep.
ayahuasca. Every now and then it's like, you know what? I got to go back. I'm ready for that next step or whatever, right? And that's where when you start talking about, and this is what I want everybody to understand, when we start talking about modalities that have a termination date, that's not a lifelong pharmaceutical project or a lifelong, therapist. You don't need to talk to therapist. You're paying $150 to hear what you already know, but do you need them forever? No, everybody's focused on this for-profit medical model, which,
Oh,
hey, great, got to make money. No, we have to cure. We have to heal. And that should have an end date. If it doesn't have an end date, then whatever you're doing ain't fucking work. I'm sorry, Sergeant Major. It ain't working. Okay, it ain't working. Sorry. So that's why things like ketamine and the psychedelics, things like I got a cold plunged box right out here, right? And you have to take, like Christi talked about, investing in yourself. But there are things, and this is my big problem, Christi, is that first responders in the military did nothing wrong. They signed up for a career of public service and they went and did their jobs. That is why I am hell-bound on this shit being covered by insurance, being paid for by the public, because we caused this. We require these amazing people like yourself to get out there and put it on the line every day. And at the end of 20 years, they might be a basket case. But if you're a basket case and you know that, hey, this is going to hurt me, but I've got coverage and disability, and I'm going to have 20 years of my hair on fire and jetting to scenes and jumping out of planes, but I am going to be taken care of. Okay, we will take those risks because we can minimize the brain trauma along the way with some of the things that we're working on. But if you think, right now, that's my problem, is all of this is out of pocket. We have veterans mortgaging their houses to invest in themselves. right? And I'm sure this is going on in the first responder community right now. And then the awareness that this stuff even exists, not to mention that, what it can do for them or not the coverage. So, that's a whole nother thing to unpack. But,
Right. And that's the
man,
importance of overlaying it into traditional medicine. And not to cut you off, right? If we can give this to PCPs, doctors who want to start yielding the medicine and reduce the learning curve, because there's training programs all over the place for this, right? Do you know that you're coming in for a copay? $10, $60.
No, you're on it. You're on it. So let's talk about that. Do you have a training program for medical practitioners that want to go through this and assess people, get them, maybe send them to 3 or 4 therapy sessions that help them unpack before they give them, the artillery shot or whatever? Okay. That I got a daughter that she's been talking. She's a nurse practitioner, psychiatric medicine. She saw what it did for me. She goes, I think this can help my patients, but there's a whole, her practitioner, she's not the owner, right? There's a whole, but so you have all right. So look, as we close, because we always have to close, unfortunately, this has been just a mad show. Let's talk about Christi Myers. Where are you at right now? What are you working on? How do people find you? Go ahead and thump your chest, man. Tell us about you are doing some amazing things.
Thank you. I'm evolving. And so this is divine in its timing. I am launching the first of its kind to go back into the educational side of becoming psychedelic. I've been in private practice for 5 years, working with ketamine for the last decade, and truly evolving my consciousness, and have experienced many of my own deaths to be able to truly birth this next evolution of what it is I'm presenting. And so this is going to be live, and I'm opening it up to you as well, Bruce. It's going to be the first of its kind, a live 7-week course to how to find the right provider, the history of ketamine, where it comes from, the different methodology, the dosing structures, the pharmacological implications, oscillating between dimensions, levels of consciousness, all of it for the layman.
Wow. That is astounding. And I think what I would like to, Christi, is we're having the second international conference on repetitive brain trauma in the world. We host this in Tampa. I would love to see if you'd like to come out and speak on this issue. I'll have Denny reach out to you and get that going. And how do people find you? How do they get a hold of you?
For sure. You can find me directly on LinkedIn and message me that way. I'm still very much N of one.
Okay, well, we're going to make you N of many. This is amazing stuff, and we want to push this all over the place. Christi, I cannot thank you enough for coming on the show. This has been amazing, and I really appreciate you getting up at 6:00 your time to come on, and get ready for a wonderful day. But thank you for your knowledge. Thank you for the awareness. This means so much to our community as we grow. And I really, really, well, number one, God bless you.
Thank
And
you.
I thank you for your service to our communities, because that is so important, and your service to others. And we really want to help you get this word out, because we do believe it should be one of the standards of care. It should be one of the go-to protocols for our community of when it comes to mental health, because it can do a lot. It can do a lot, but right now it's just not an option, and that needs to change. So thank you so much for coming on the show, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you. And I will send you over Becoming Psychedelic. And this first cohort is going to be the early adopters. And so it's really going to outline how to find the right provider and all the different things that
we will push that out all over the place. And maybe we're going to do the Army Navy game with Fuel coming up. Fuel the Band is going to be our opening act for this year. So we're really swinging for the fence on this one. But please let us know when that's out, and we'll push it all over the place.
I love it. Thank you so much.
No problem. Folks, Christi Myers, man. And that is another wonderful podcast of Broken Brains. And I didn't have my book to show you, but all right, remember, we got the summit on repetitive brain trauma coming up September 3rd and 4th of this year. Big Mac for Mac Day, September 24th. Don't forget that. That's coming up as well. We'll be attending the National Military Healthcare conference here in August, pushing that work out. Don't forget, go to our website, www.mpfact.org. Get the free book. It's free, so you can be informed. Our app, Head Smart, is on the Google Store, Apple Store. Get it. And please like us, what is that? Like us, subscribe to us, and push us all over the place, because we are making roads out there, and I'm new to this social media stuff. And we want to thank our sponsor, the Mac Parkman Foundation, the only national voice in repetitive brain trauma. We're working with so many organizations to make this, as Christi said, this has to be a standard of care in terms of knowledge. We have to get people educated on this, because the issue of repetitive head impacts and repetitive blast exposure and the crisis of mental health illness that it is producing has to be addressed. It has to be understood. So our hats off to the Mac Parkman Foundation for sponsoring this podcast. And we thank you all for attending. Until the next show, take care of those brains. They're the only ones you got. And God bless you all. Take care.